I'm Sharon Israel, and this is Planet Poet Words in Space. My guest today is award-winning poet Cammy Thomas, here to discuss and read from her most recent poetry collection, Tremors, published by Four-Way Books Press. Also joining us later in the show will be Planet Poet's Poet at Large, Pamela Manché Pearce. Hi, Cammy.
Hi, Sharon.
I'm so glad you're with us. I am going to be reading for everybody your bio. Cammy Thomas's first book of poems, Cathedral of Wish, received the 2006 Norma Farber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America. A fellowship from the Ragdale Foundation helped her complete her second book, Inscriptions. Her third book, Tremors, came out in September 2021. All are published by Four-Way Books. Her poems have recently appeared in Image, Poetry Porch, Amsterdam Quarterly, Gravel, and Compose, and in the anthologies, Poems in the Aftermath, Indolent Books, and Echoes from Walden, edited by David Leff from Wayfarer Books. Her poem, French Toast, was featured on Poem a Day on August 6, 2021. Two of her poems are the text for Far Past War, a choral work by her sister, composer Augusta Reed Thomas, which was performed by the Cathedral Choral Society at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., March 13th, 2022. And Cammy, would you start us off with a poem from Tremors?
I will. This poem is called Mum. Out in the world, our smiles look perfect. Inside the house, dread keeps us mum. Our smiles look perfect. The driveway is long. Dread keeps us mum. No one can hear. The driveway is long, his braided horsewhip. No one can hear. Old leather frayed. His braided horsewhip. We laugh at him. Old leather frayed. Under the table. We laugh at him. He grabs our legs. Under the table, pulled out kicking. He grabs our legs. His 10-year-old girl, pulled out kicking, points the shotgun. His 10-year-old girl, no one can hear, points the shotgun. Dread keeps us mum.
That's Cammy Thomas reading her poem, Mum. It's so powerful, Cammy. I want to read from Mom Egg Review about your book. While the organization of Cammy Thomas's latest poetry collection, Tremors, is simple, 3 parts that address each stage of the poet's life, the material is not. Tucked within these pages are poems both humorous and sober, declarative and unsure, with the unifying theme being tremors, both physical and figurative. And that's by Michelle Panic, December 2021. I want to know more about the structure of Tremors, Cammy, but could you tell me why Mum is the opening poem of the book?
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. It does come at the beginning of the first section, which is about childhood, and obviously the poem is as well. But also, I wanted to put something in the front that had a bit of form to it. I like to play with form, and you may have heard the repeating lines. It's a pantoum, sort of. It breaks the rules a little bit at the end, but I'm really compelled by form and kind of wrestle with it a lot. I like Gwendolyn Brooks's poetry, for example, because I feel she is an expert at form, but she always breaks it and makes it her own. So that was part of it, that I wanted to get form in there. And then maybe another part of it was I wanted to not pull my punches too much, to really talk genuinely about elements of the life I grew up in. And I should say, Mae West once said, I used to be Snow White, but I drifted. And I wanted to say here, this used to be an autobiography, but it drifted. So,
Thank goodness.
it has elements of truth to it, but it's also been adjusted because of what happens when you write a poem. Things start to shift.
But you keep the terror. I found it very frightening, the poem.
Yes.
And it's all about the father. And
Yes, and I think
yeah, it's called mum, though. Two ways of looking at that word, of course.
yes, the pun there is, I don't know, it wasn't intentional the way all the best puns are. It was inadvertent, but then when I saw it, I kind of shivered because I thought, oh, yeah, it is about the father and the terror of that. And then the question always comes, well, where does the mother fit? If this is what's going on with the father, where is the mother?
Yes, yes. It sets the tone for the book also.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pantoum-ish poem. I admire your bravery for breaking the form and knowing how to do it in so few words, really. I mean, the lines are very terse. That's sort of explains the emotion of what's going on for me in the
I always try to
words.
be very prolix. I try to use tons of words, but somehow things boil down for me.
Mm.
My main action as an editor is cutting.
Why three parts? Can you just explain briefly? It's pretty self-explanatory in the book, but not quite.
Well, honestly, I had 300 pages of undifferentiated material. My sister who is the book is dedicated to, demanded that I send her the entire pile of undifferentiated stuff. And I said, I really can't impose on you with that because it's chaos. And she said, no, 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 just send it. And she read through the whole thing. And at the end, she said, well, clearly, the most intense poems here are family poems, so I've kept all of those. And it seems to me clear that you have a chronological order here: childhood, middle of life when you're raising kids, and then later life. So I put them in that order.
Oh my goodness.
So what can I say? It was a miracle that my sister did for me. And I switched it around a little bit, and the editors had more things to say, of course, but pretty much stuck with her concept. Because that's, I think, one of the hardest things is to figure out what order things come in. And it's a great gift to have someone else spot it.
Cammy, would you read French Toast?
I would be happy to. And listen, before I go on, I just want to
Yes.
say thank you so much, Sharon, for inviting me to be on. I'm just thrilled. It's really so much fun to
Oh, it's
talk
such a
about
pleasure
my
to have you on. You're such a great poet. Thank you so much. And
Thank
and
you.
a friend. We the three of us, Pamela, Manché, Pearce, and Cammy Thomas, and I take the Jeffrey Nutter Walson Glass seminars. That's how we met each other, Cammy. And so
It is.
it is thrilling for me to have you on. So thank you. And French Toast. Why don't you read
All
it?
right.
We'll talk about it.
French toast. Ah, my mother used to make it with eggs and milk and stale white bread, slid onto a plate with log cabin fake maple syrup, and I always wanted more. To disappear what troubled me, the man under the moon, the man in our living room. Make enough spitting bacon to forget the broken game boards, splintered bat, missing family car, his vanishings and sudden returns, smelling of other rooms. My mother's tears over the stove, her catchy, milky breath.
That's Cammy Thomas reading her poem, French Toast, which was a poem a day, a poem on August. It appeared August 6th, 2021, which was exciting. Did you get a lot of feedback on that when you had that posted?
Yeah, some. I got some fun notes from people I hadn't talked to in a long time, in addition to the people that I normally talk to. So yeah, it was really fun. And Kazem Ali was the editor that month, and I had known him not terribly well, but in other contexts, and he was so gracious and warm. It was a good experience.
Your mother appears in this poem. I don't know for the first time in the book, but she's the main character here. You have to tell me about that fake maple syrup. How does that it resonates for me so much in this book?
Well,
In
you
this
know, it's
poem.
kind of a 50s scene where you've got the stale white bread and the log
Yes.
cabot syrup, which I always thought was maple syrup, but of course it wasn't. It didn't, it was just, sugar. It was delicious, you gotta say. Certainly as a kid, I thought it was absolutely terrific, but I sort of wanted it to have that 50s feel of
Mhm.
the what one of my friend's mothers called flannel bread, and then the fake syrup,
Mm.
and still it was delicious in the circumstance. It was something to look forward to.
The word fake is so interesting. Of course, I remember I gave me many cavities that fake syrup. I
Yes,
loved it.
absolutely.
I loved it. But
Yes.
it was true comfort from your mom, but in the circumstances about the man that's discussed there's something unsettling about that. It gives a different patina to the poem.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of comfort and fear.
Hmm.
And that man is my dad, and
Hmm.
it's this mix of comfort and fear. And this is one of the things I think is most important in art, really, is to be able to hold these disparate things together, let them speak to each other, not resolve them. I always think of, you probably know John Keats's idea of negative capability, that is holding disparate things without reaching for resolution. I think he says negative capability is when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. And that to me has been a really primary consideration as a writer, to not resolve, to try to hold the full ambiguity. Um, and just to say here, it's kind of not just that there's mom and dad who could have very different, um, one could bring comfort and one could bring fear, but sometimes the comfort and fear are in the same person or in the same circumstance. To just have, the idea of life as being filled with that. The other thing I always think about, that's also, I should have it on my wall here, but I just moved and I don't have all my stuff. But I love this quote from To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. One of the characters thinks, um, nothing is simply one thing.
Mm.
And that's another central idea for me, that, it's comfort and it's terror, and they're part of the same thing. They're all part of the same thing.
Thank you, Cammy. Every poet needs to hear that, I think. And it also, the ambiguity and the lack of resolution allows the reader to interface with the poem, if that's the word, more completely. That's beautiful. Thank you. I want to reintroduce my guest, award-winning poet Cammy Thomas, here to discuss and read from her most recent collection, Tremors. And Cammy, would you read from part two? I think we decided on a poem called Chilling Kills. Would you like to start with that, part two?
Sure, yes. Chilling kills. I'm a killer from my living room, among my lovely things. A killer, swimming in a cool pool, trying not to hurt anyone. Under my own tall trees, a killer. Everything about me kills. Even in my everyday shoes, even in my cool pool. In my living room, I take it as a given. Nothing wicked comes. Mowers mowing. I vacuum dust away while somehow killing. I take it as a given how clean we keep it, how wicked. These chilling kills of people I don't see because I'm vacuuming. How clean we keep it, my America. How free of weeds.
That's great. How free of weeds. Cammy reading Chilling Kills. The repetition, it's so powerful.
This is really odd, because this is a poem that has it's actually kind of, I think, jumping off from an earlier poem. I was not aware of that as I was writing it, but as I thought about it later, it has a rhythmic feeling, and it also has this idea that we could be causing a lot of harm, even living our own kind of innocent and relatively comfortable lives. Just in my daily life in the suburbs, I could be causing harm. And, it took, I don't know, years for me to hear the poem that was behind it, but it was Gwendolyn Brooks. And it was a poem that's called The Boy Died in My Alley. I don't know if you're familiar with that poem, but what she's talking about is how the police come and knock on her door and say, a boy died in your alley. Do you know him? Do you know anything about him? And she kind of has to say to herself, well, I don't know him, but I do know him. This has happened before. And actually here, and then she rhymes all the way through it. It's fairly long, but can I just read you a little tiny bit of it?
Sure.
The Boy Died in My Alley by Gwendolyn Brooks. The boy died in my alley without my having known. Policeman said next morning, apparently died alone. You heard a shot? Policeman said. Shots I hear and shots I hear. I never see the dead. And it goes on from there. She says, I never saw his face at all. I never saw his future fall, but I have known this boy. And then right at the end, she says, as he was dying, he cried not only father, but mother, sister, brother. The cry climbed up the alley. It went up to the wind. It hung upon the heaven for a long stretched strain of moment. The red floor of my alley is a special speech to me. So, when I thought of that, it just gave me a shiver because I realized that, for a long time I felt sort of guilty about chilling kills because it says I could be killing people without even knowing it because of my way of living. But then I thought, and what am I doing about that?
Right.
And I took comfort from Brooks's poem. The poem also points out that there's a kind of inevitability,
Yes.
a repetition,
That's right.
a frozen stuckness in the culture at large. Yes, we should all be doing things, and yes, we're all kind of paralyzed. And also the rhyming and the repeating, I think, again, makes that point that this is sort of a cycling thing.
Yes, it's a repetitive, the actions are repetitive.
Yes.
The consequences are repetitive.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Cammy. And I was wondering if you could read two poems in tandem, Orbiting and Force.
Absolutely. Orbiting above the earth, watching it loop by in its interstellar loneliness, caught in my spacesuit, air running out, can't stop the wobble, I wake in my spaceship under layers of quilts. Still dark outside, and in this cocoon waiting, thin air full of doubt, I turn and see out the porthole of my eye a form like a far-off mountain range, moving slightly, rising and falling, and I shift toward it until my ship docks gently against my husband's body. Now I'll read Force, and I just want to say for people who may just be listening to it for the first time, it's in fragments, and I'll pause briefly in between them. And there are two narratives that are fragmented in this poem. It's not terribly long, so I think it'll work out okay. Force. The leaves hid everything. I was very young. The muscular strength of men until someone, which I try not to think about. I found dead wasps beneath the nest. They're pale. It was 50 years ago, and I can't remember. Forced me down, pulled a knife, he. After heavy rain last weekend, the nest, tears, sweat dropping in the dirt, while heads bowed, thick antennae slicked back, took me into the woods I hadn't realized. Paper wasps built an enormous nest. Hands like hot wrenches. Should I have? Someone held my sister down, too. Made of spit and leaves buzzing. Must have done it before, he knew. The wasps have gone, leaving only their dead. His face, I told myself, no man would ever.
That's Cammy Thomas reading Force, preceded by the poet reading Orbiting. That poem on assault, on sexual assault, is so gripping, again, with so few words. And I'm so glad you put those pauses in there. You get to hear the speaker thinking and looking at that wasp's nest. Could you briefly describe the difference between those two poems? One is so about comfort, and one is about violence, this violence.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of them as a pair, but actually, in a way they are, because, one is about a relationship with a man, you know, my husband, and then one is about sexual assault that happened 50 years ago. So, in a sense, there's a trauma and then there's a resolution in a way that the other thing is that I thought about them very differently formally. I thought of the first one, Orbiting, which really appears as a verse paragraph. It's kind of a solid, stable column, as the topic says as well. And it's kind of, in a way, my sense of this relationship of, the speaker who's kind of out there flipping around in the universe, sort of not really knowing where we are exactly, and then the solidity of the husband's physical self there as a place to well, dock in the terms
Right.
of the poem. And then Force, originally this was very different. I had written two poems, one at approximately the same time. One was about this 50-year-old sexual assault, and one was about these wasps, this big paper wasp nest at our house. And I have to say, as with the title poem, Tremors, I was really influenced by this class I took from Gabriella Calvo-Caresi at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. She loves randomness. She's a very, as does Jeffrey Nutter, the power of the random to reveal things to you. And when I looked at the original assault poem that I'd written, I thought, well, it's so explanatory, it's so narrative, it's so linear, and it isn't like the event at all, which was chaos and fear. And just little, now I just remember these tiny little, flashes, these little tiny bits of film, if you want to put it that way. And so from thinking back to Gabriella's class, I thought, well, I could actually mix this with something else. And I think originally I had three poems that I chopped up and pushed together, and then I took one of them out because I thought the wasps worked well with the assault, and I just began manipulating the lines. I really did literally have them cut out on the table, and I was moving them around.
It works beautifully. It's so powerful. There's something about that waspness. It's, again, you can't really describe why the effect is so strong, but it works brilliantly.
Thank you.
It
Thank you
gives the
so
reader
much.
a respite, also, if you can call it a respite, about what's going on, as if you're being the reader is being sexual assaulted, and then you look up and you see this wasp nest, and you can focus on that. That's beautiful, also.
Yeah, that there's there are these moments in, for a long time I taught Dante's Inferno, and in English, okay, and there are these moments in Dante's Inferno when things are just so awful you can't believe it. There are devils stabbing people with pitchforks in the mud, and it's just terrible. People screaming and fire, and then suddenly he uses a simile, and often it's a simile about the beautiful fields up in the light near Florence with the dappled trees and the beautiful blue sky, and he gives you this moment of gorgeousness, and then as in a simile, and then plunges you back in to Inferno, and it has this really weird effect. On the one hand, it's a relief, and on the other hand, it increases the pain when you go back. It's like, oh, now I remember the beautiful stuff, but the wasp nest, obviously, it's kind of both threatening and beautiful. It's a natural thing and it's okay, but on the other hand, it's a big nest full of really big wasps.
I want them to stay put. You're listening to Planet Poet Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, here with award-winning poet Cammy Thomas, talking about and reading from her collection, Tremors. And now, joining us from Manhattan to bring us the latest poetry news and the latest in poetic insights is Planet Poet's poet at large, Pamela Manché Pearce. Writer, poet, and visual artist, Pamela Pearce is currently editing Autumn in New York, a novella in progress. Hi, Pamela.
I'm so happy to be here this morning. I really am. And Cammy, I'm listening, and I think that your poetry is the most intense, powerful work that I've heard on Planet Poet. I'm really, really deeply engaged by it. And further to what Sharon said about the respite, I think that your pauses and your repetitions do that, and they don't do that. They give us a little breath, but then the next volley is coming. So it's very, very, it's a terrific way for you to bring this material to us in a way that is just extremely powerful. So thank you very much.
Oh my gosh!
I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to be here hearing.
Thank you.
So now I have to change my head from this intensity and this powerful work to bring you the Planet Poet Back to School Special. So my Back to School Special is because it's September, and for me, because school has always been such a part of my life, it's new beginnings. I recently read about the 30th anniversary of Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. And I've begun to take another look at it. And actually, I've started it again. I've done it several times in the past, and I've started it again. And I'm going to do this 12-week course and see what happens to me between now and the new year. You may or may not know a lot about The Artist's Way, but it has purportedly changed the lives of many artists across multiple genres. Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love credits it with giving her everything she needed to create that best-selling work. Other artists like the photographer Helmut Newton, Alicia Keys, and Pete Townshend have all used it and feel the same way. Cameron's book is an international bestseller that has sold more than 4 million copies. She wrote it in 1992 and self-published it. And self-publishing in 1992 was Xeroxing pages and stapling them together. Then found a publisher, and it went on to this great classic, now published by Penguin Random House. For me, when I discovered this a number of years ago, I had been schooled in the AIC method of writing, which is ass in chair. And that means that you sit down and you say, I have to produce 20,000 words or 5 pages, or I have to sit here until I bleed for 3 hours or whatever. And it was absolutely a relief to me to find out that somebody was trying to do something else. Julia Cameron was really trying to release this what was all inside of us. And one of the most important things that she says, I believe, is that, quote, serious art begins with serious play, and that limiting beliefs and fears are what inhibit the creative process. And creativity is an experience, to my eye, a spiritual experience, end quote. She wants to foster the link that the poet Dylan Thomas calls the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And composer Johannes Brahms revealed, straight away, the ideas flow in upon me directly from God. So Karen is trying to link this spiritual aspect of creativity, which is unleashed in her mind by two of her major things are morning pages, which is 3 handwritten pages every morning when you first get up that are completely free form. No censoring, no editing, no rereading them, just stream of consciousness writing. This frees your brain, allows new material to come in, and it also helps, especially young writers or beginning writers who are writers having blocks and difficulty. It gives you a format, a routine to go to every morning where you know that you're going to pour out whatever is in your brain at that particular time. Her other very important idea is about the artist's date, where you take a block of time, a couple of hours a week, ideally 2 hours, and you just fill up. You do something that is not an errand, it's not a lunch date with a friend, and it's not work. It's visiting an art gallery for 2 hours, or a thrift shop, or staring at a pond, and it's just allowing whatever is supposed to come to you during that particular 2 hours. I think it's a 1-2 punch in a good way. The morning pages clean out your brain, and the artist state helps you fill up again. That's exactly what her method is, and it has worked for me. I've done artist pages. I have file cabinets full of them, and I just discovered a 62-page short story that I wrote when I was living in Key West and doing morning pages. And one morning, 2 sentences came up from nowhere. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Boo Hoo. Her real name was Boo Hoo Hoo, but she shortened it. Where did that come from? I have no idea, but I have a very good 62-page short story. I'm going back and I'll see what I can drag up from the bottom or top of my brain with Julia Cameron moving forward. And I also want to say one of her other things on it is that she also believes in being part of a creative cluster, which is a group of fellow artists who support your creative life. And I want to thank you, Sharon, because that's exactly what Planet Poet is. We have you and fabulous guests like Cammy to thank for giving us all a creative cluster. And this one is over the airwaves.
Oh, thank you, Pamela.
Well, I mean it. So I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here discussing this, do either of you have any things that you do to foster your creativity or to shake out ideas or fill up any of that?
Well, I'm a very kind of rebellious and disobedient person in a way, that whenever anybody kind of gives me a plan, or when I give myself a plan, I immediately start tearing the plan down. So I really have had to find a way to kind of back into this stuff. Otherwise, I just don't do it.
Okay.
So I always have a tiny notebook in my purse. Mm-hmm. And when I'm driving around or sitting somewhere doing something else, I'm usually sort of sketching down little ideas, because you know how it is. You get a line like that wonderful line about Boo Hoo. If you don't write that down, it's gone. It's just gone. So even though I don't do regular morning pages, I definitely always carry a book with me. And I always used to tell students, whatever your form, you can type it on your phone. It doesn't matter, whatever your technology is. But if you have something in your head, put it down immediately. Do not wait. Do not pass go. So I do that. And I didn't know I was having an artist date. I thought it was just being kind of lazy and not staying focused on the stuff that was on my pile that I was supposed to be doing. So I'm sorry to hear that it has an official designation because
does.
now I
Yes.
might stop doing it.
No,
But yes,
no.
I very frequently, I tend to just once in a while say, I have so much work to do. This is absolutely impossible. There's no way I can do it. I know I'm going to go to a movie. It just does not make any sense, but it's kind of, I'll go to the botanical garden. We moved to this place where we're right near the New England Botanical Garden at Tower Hill, which is pretty nice. And I'll go there, or even just take a break and sit outside and, feel the breeze. I do completely believe that you have to fill up your well. And because your well gets emptied by not just by your creativity, but also just by the exigencies of daily life. It's just really, really hard. So totally agree with all of that. And I would absolutely agree that what Sharon does is part of the creative cluster to help poets keep going. It's not just to get things out on the air, but it's also to really say we're part of this community.
Yes.
And maybe we tell each other things that are useful. The other thing I do to enforce, because as I've told you, I'm so rebellious, is I'm in a couple of writing groups. Jeffrey's is one of them. Jeffrey Nutter, absolutely terrific. And then I have 3 other groups that are once a month. One of them's actually just one person and myself, and we've talked every week or two. In the pandemic, we were every week.
Having this poetry show, I learn so much every time. And
can I just say something about that, Sharon? I am so impressed by how carefully you read my book. I just want to tell you, I really deeply appreciate that.
You are so welcome. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
That was beautiful, Pamela. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Cammy, would you read a section of 40 Years On? Is that from the second or the third section of the book?
It's just the last poem in the second section.
Okay. Would you like to read that? Because I think it's really a great poem.
40 years on. I love how you disobey me. Loose, muscular bodies draped around the room. Whatever I want you to do, your heads drop down during Homer, Tennyson. A boy might bury himself, pale, brilliant, behind dirty red hair, might say nothing despite every trick I know. Or you, girl, bringing up Wittgenstein, knowing no one knows who the F that is. You're baiting me. Will I put you in your place? You all rush, whispering like a river, tremble like marble turning to leaves, your golden hair, your brown hair, top knotted or brushing the backs of your chairs, your crowded loneliness. You ask, can't a soul ever change? Eternal deities, all forthcoming, you climb twined trellises into sunburnt mirth. I used to think I was there with you. Was I there with you? In the middle of Macbeth, look at the arm I hold out to you. Its surprising papery skin, its ropey veins. I'm your grandmother now. Your liquid animal eyes look at me as down a long tunnel across a galaxy.
That's Cammy Thomas, 40 Years On. Those loose, muscular bodies. You know immediately, I just knew those are your students. And it's great. The comments, it's all about, it brings in so much, your teaching, the extent of your teaching, poetics. I know that your dissertation was based on Tennyson.
Yes, that's right.
Get Tennyson in the poem. But it's a charming poem, and it still speaks of your connection to their essence, whether they recognize it or not.
That's it. I loved teaching them for so many years. And, you know, after 40 years, that is a really long time. And I was just a little older than they were when I started, and then became this ancient crone by the time I left. But one of the things that I hadn't realized was, you know, there was a reason Tennyson popped in. I was thinking about, okay, what are the deadest poets here that I can bring in here that I'm always trying to teach them about, and they're kind of staring at me in bemusement. And Homer, we had great fun with. We read the Odyssey. I read it a zillion times with high school students. And then Tennyson, I got to insert less frequently because he's not one of all-time hit parade currently in academic world. I started teaching in university and then moved to high school. But in any case, Tennyson, I really came to realize is in this poem because, you know, the poem's kind of about how you get older, but they don't. All teachers recognize this at a certain moment, that I'm still they're still the age they were. I'm always teaching, you know, somebody between 14 and 20, let's say, but I get older and older and older. And of course, that's the theme of one of the greatest poems by Tennyson, which is Tithonus, which is the story of a mortal man, Tithonus, who fell in love with the dawn, immortal Aurora, the dawn. And they went to Zeus to petition for Tithonus to have immortal life so he could stay with Aurora. And Zeus gave him immortal life, but they forgot to ask for immortal youth. So Tithonus gets older and older and older, while Aurora, the goddess of the dawn, gets up every day just as beautiful as she's ever been. So I didn't even, you know, it's how you talk to yourself in your work. You don't even know what you're saying until years later when you go, oh my God, that was so where I was. So, you know, he is immortal age in the presence of immortal youth.
Wow, thank you for that, Cammy. And I wish I had you teaching me about Tennyson when I was 16.
Oh, he's dazzling. He's dazzling.
Bringing it to life. Would you read the title poem of the collection, Tremors, for us?
Tremors. I might say a word about this too, that it too is a kind of a patchwork poem, so don't be worried if we jump around a bit. I hope it'll make sense together. Tremors. Provincetown Harbor is on the other side of the houses, past the tall linden on Pearl Street. Ksh, ksh of vibrating leaves. Next to a purple house, a small girl with a pinwheel is crying. When the wind comes, the boats all face right. Which way is east? Sometimes I don't care whether things matter to anyone but me. The pink roses don't care either. They grow for someone else's pleasure, but they don't know it. The girl's mother is so mad. Stop running in the street. She grabs her roughly, too roughly. Weedy oyster shell driveway, partial view of the unreachable bay, dark pink hollyhocks. Tremor in my hand makes writing hard. In the leaves. The father untangles the girl from her red-faced mother, leads her down the street, still carrying her pinwheel. A pile of clamshells in the driveway. I'm drowning. The mother has vanished. We can never walk back the spent. Peonies keep their green, but their faces are spikes now.
That's Cammy Thomas reading Tremors. What can I say? That the patchwork gives it its tremendous resonance and vitality. Those peony spikes at the end. Peonies are such beautiful, lush, large flowers, and we're left with the spikes, but there's so much poignancy. How did you were you there for a workshop when you wrote this, or were you
Yes,
vacationing?
yes, this was another poem. Really, this was an actual exercise given to us by Gabriella Calvacaresi in that workshop I took. We wandered around P-Town, sitting and writing, just writing a spill of what we were seeing. And then she gathered us, and we did other exercises to have available to us as well, sort of in the idea that you generate a lot of material and then you can find ways of folding it in together. And that's what happened here. This is sort of spread all around the page in a semi-disorderly way, but again, it was pieces that were carefully, replaced and replaced, if you want to put it that way, to get together the sense of Provincetown, the sense of the girl with the pinwheel,
So
and
much.
then this sense of what is the sort of I don't know, ineffable quality of being in life, that it's endlessly fascinating, that your emotions can go everywhere, that the peony has its gorgeous, enormous, fragrant head, and also when that falls off after the first rain, it has that little spiky bit that's left. And then next year it'll all come back, of course. So it was really generated from experience, the experience of sitting around that day, and then worked over to kind of make. And then it took a long time thinking, is that a linden tree? What is that tree? Just kind of trying to get the details of Provincetown right. But it all came from that moment at the Fine Arts Work Center.
Are
Which
you
is
listening? What poets are you listening out there? Are you listening?
It's been very useful to me. I don't know how it would be for others, but
It's also the theme of aging, the tremors, the age, and the child and the child trauma. It's all there, but it allows you, as Jeffrey Nutter would say, to wander beautifully through the poem.
yes, and just a word about the tremors. You know, I do have a hard time writing now, especially if I have any adrenaline going in my system. I really cannot make, and there's nothing, it's just a familial, it's a benign tremor. It's not a terrible thing. It's just, I can't really, you do fine motor stuff very easily especially if I'm excited or I've run a mile or something. But it seemed to me that, especially in the era we're in right now, everything is kind of vibrating and tremulous, and everything seems quite unstable. The world political situation, the climate situation, the pandemic that we've all been coping with. It's led to this vibration, and I almost feel like my own physical incapacities are, there's so much of that in the world at large, and you just try to keep going. If you can't write very well, you just keep doing it anyway. So that's a little bit about it.
Nice.
And the cover of the book shows this broken up dock in the water. And I look at that and I think too, yeah, it's kind of not working, but it's kind of working. So, it's the tremor is there, but you just keep going anyway.
Well, I think it's working, Cammy. It's working.
Thank you very much.
Cammy, would you tell our listeners if they want more information about getting your book, where they should go?
You can just go to my website, cammythomas.com. All the info is right there. CAMMY.
Any upcoming events that are going to happen? Are you reading more these days?
I do have a concert of Emily Dickinson's music, poems set to music, not mine. I'm just doing a small part in that. That's at Lexington Community Education, if you're interested in that, and it would be coming up in about a week. And then I have a reading at Cervena Barva Press in Somerville, Mass. And that's coming up in October, I believe. It will all be posted on my website.
Great. And I want you to we'll go out with you reading two poems of yours. In Love with the Sun and Far Past War. The text for Far Past War, a cultural work by Cammy's sister, composer Augusta Reed Thomas. This piece was performed by the Cathedral Choral Society at the National Cathedral in Washington on March 13th, 2022. How incredibly exciting and wonderful that the two of you can collaborate on a piece that so many people have heard.
You know, it was absolutely one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I will just say, to hear my words sung by about 200 voices in a gigantic cathedral. Now, my sister is a successful composer, so she has things like this happening for her all the time. But I was totally stunned. And in fact, she made me rehearse going up to the front and shaking the hand of the concertmaster and the conductor
Great idea.
so that I wouldn't fall flat on my face, because she could see I was like a deer in the headlights. So she asked me, can I briefly say, she said, I want this to be a poems about nature. I want them to be happy. I want them to be short. I want them to have short lines, and I want them to end in open vowels. And I was like, okay, I never read about nature, hardly ever. And happy, I don't know about happy. And the open vowels, what are open vowels? Short lines I can do. And anyway, we worked together, and this is the result. So it really was a collaboration. The poems are very short. And it's going to be performed again, actually, at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute somewhere near the end of October. And I guess I need to put that on my website as well.
Yes, please.
I don't know if there'll be a recording of that or not. But anyway, here are the two poems that she set. And I followed her directions very, very specifically. And just to say again, thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
Far Past War. 1. In love with the sun. I'm in love with the sun. Ave, ave. Early and late, I fly at the sky. The sun's rays in my eye. Ave, ave. I can't stare straight at my desire, only sideways. I go round and round. The source of all, the brightest way. Ave, ave. 2. Far Past War. Ah, sun, O moon, we crave peace. Heron standing in the lake, say to the moon, no more war, no war, we crave. Great blue heron, wide her veil of wings, glide down night, sail over sun, drop far past war. Take us too.
Cammy Thomas, thank you so much for your incredible work and for your lovely presence on the air. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Pamela Manché Pearce, Poet at Large for Planet Poet. You've been listening to Planet Poet Words in Space on WIOX Community Radio.
Thank you, Sharon.